All right, today we're diving into some of the most dramatic stories you'll ever hear. But we're not looking at them as just, ancient history. Think of them more like timeless blueprints for how to handle life when the pressure is really on. I mean, it sounds like the beginning of some huge fantasy movie, right? A king commanding spirits, a betrayed prisoner, a man inside a whale. But the real link between these figures, Prophet Suleiman, Yusuf, and Yunus, is actually something much deeper. It all comes down to the virtues they perfected when facing the biggest tests life could throw at them. So let's talk about what these stories really are. They're basically incredible case studies in human character. They're not just about miracles or things that happened a long time ago. They're a detailed playbook on how to face the core challenges that, let's be honest, we all have to deal with in one way or another. And we're going to break it down into three huge themes, three big tests that really define the human experience: hardship, power, and, our own mistakes.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, the test of hardship. Everyone goes through it, but it looks different for everybody. And to really get into this, we're going to look at two prophets who went through completely different types of suffering.
And you can see the difference right away. On one hand, you have Prophet Ayub, who lost everything on the outside: his money, his health, his place in the community. Then you have Prophet Yusuf, whose trial was just so personal. I mean, betrayed by his own family and thrown in prison for something he didn't do. So two totally different kinds of pain, right? But the virtue they both had to master? The exact same one. An incredible, deep-seated patience.
And with Yusuf, you got to remember, this wasn't just one bad day. This was a journey that spanned decades of his life, just one dark turn after another. Can you imagine? The absolute terror of being thrown in that well, the shame of being sold into slavery, the crushing loneliness of a prison cell. Each step of the way required an even deeper level of patience and trust, and a constant fight not to let all that bitterness just eat him alive. And all of that before he was finally raised up to a position in the palace.
The real test isn't just what happens to you, it's how you respond. And Prophet Ayub's prayer after everything he went through is just, wow. It's incredible. He doesn't demand anything, he doesn't complain, he just humbly states his situation and then immediately confirms his faith in God's mercy. It's like a masterclass in how to maintain your dignity and faith when you're in the middle of a total crisis.
But, hardship isn't the only test out there. What about the flip side? What happens when you go from having nothing to having, everything? That might be an even tougher challenge. So now we're going to shift gears to the test of power and the massive challenge of using it without letting it corrupt you.
And when we talk about power, Prophet Suleiman is in a league of his own. His kingdom was just beyond anything we can imagine. We're not just talking about being a king. We're talking command over the wind itself, armies of jinn building massive structures for him, and get this, he could even understand what animals were saying, right down to a tiny ant. His power was, for all intents and purposes, absolute.
Okay, so this is a really important point that the sources are clear on. What he had wasn't magic. Magic is about using forbidden means, maybe calling on darker forces. What Suleiman had was the complete opposite. These were divine gifts, miracles, given to him directly by God. And with a gift that huge comes an equally huge responsibility.
And this right here is the key. With a kingdom that's literally beyond imagination, this was his reaction. He didn't see all this power as proof of how great he was. Nope, he saw it as a test of his character. Am I going to be grateful for this, or am I going to let it make me arrogant? That kind of self-awareness, that's the line between a truly wise leader and a total tyrant.
All right, that brings us to our third test, and this is one that I think hits home for every single one of us, the test of our own mistakes. What happens when we mess up? When we're the ones in the wrong? How do you find your way back from that?
The story of Prophet Yunus is just the perfect picture of this. He gets frustrated with his people and basically walks off the job without getting permission from God. And what happens next? His journey takes him straight into a storm, gets him tossed into the sea, and then he's swallowed by a giant whale. I mean, you can't get more symbolic than that. He was literally in the deepest, darkest place imaginable. But it was right there, in that total darkness, that he found his way back to the light.
And this prayer, it's considered one of the most powerful for a reason. Listen to it. There's no but. There are no excuses. He's not blaming anyone else. It's just a pure, simple acknowledgement of God's greatness and a full admission that, I messed up. I was wrong. And that right there shows us the first, most crucial step to getting back on track, taking 100% responsibility.
But there's another side to this, isn't there? What about when you're the one who's been wronged by someone else's mistake? Repenting is one thing, but forgiving is the other side of that coin. And let's be real, forgiving can be the much harder thing to do. It takes a different kind of strength altogether.
And this takes us right back where we started, full circle to Prophet Yusuf. Think about it. After everything his brothers did to him, the betrayal, leaving him for dead in a well, all those years of pain, he finally has them right where he wants them. He has all the power. He could get revenge. And instead, he just says, "No blame will there be upon you today." He offers them complete, total forgiveness. That's not weakness. That is the absolute peak of spiritual strength. It's freedom. So when we start to pull all these different threads together, you see a really clear picture start to form. These aren't just random, disconnected stories. They're all different parts of one unified message about what it means to build great character.
And this chart really puts it all together beautifully. You have Ayub facing loss with patience, Sulaiman facing incredible power with gratitude, Yunus facing his own mistake with repentance, and Yusuf facing injustice with forgiveness, you see? Each one mastered a key virtue through a very specific test. It's like they're all pieces of one big blueprint for living a life of integrity.
So what's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, what these stories are really telling us is that our circumstances, whether we have a lot or a little, whether we're in charge or being oppressed, that's all just the stage. It's the arena. The real test, the one that truly matters, is always happening on the inside. It's about holding on to our integrity, our humility, and our faith, no matter what's going on around us. And that leaves us with one final thing to think about. We've looked at the test of hardship, the test of power, and the test of our own mistakes. They all take a different kind of inner strength to overcome. So the question for you is, which one do you think is the hardest to get right? Which one really poses the biggest challenge to our character? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for digging into all this with me.